It's on now. I had hit the button. Here you go. Sorry.
Everybody, please start making your way to your seats, please. Okay, I would like to welcome everybody to Portico tonight. My name is Amber. Hello. So for raffle today, you're going to not only get a gift card, you're also going to be getting a book from Shane. Shane is speaking with us tonight. He has a book called Go and Do, and it's 9 Axioms on Peacemaking and Transformation. So let's see who gets 2 prizes in one. Drum roll, please. 9, 3, 7, 8, 7, 9, 2. Josh! Josh, come and get your book. Okay. Next person, drum roll, please. 9, 3, 7, 8, 7, 8, 8. Nova. Wait, I don't know where my ticket went. All right. 9, 3, 7, 8, 7, 9, 0. Abby! I forgot to mention, your gift card is inside the book. Okay, now for some announcements. After Portico, please stay and hang out because Gary, the College of Great Hills, is going to host another After Portico hangout. So once you're done with your groups, just hang out around here if you want to go to the After Portico hangout. Also, if you're doing Beach Reach this Saturday, be here at 9 a.m. because we're doing training. It's time to get trained for Beach Reach. Also, for the guys, Friday, you're having a lunch at 12. Don't be late. Be here at the BSM at 12. Yes. Okay, and then also Jamie's going to come up and explain how Portico is going to look tonight because it's going to look a little bit different.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, what's my walk up? No. Hey, everybody. So as we've been talking about, we are going to be starting a new series in Portico for the next couple of weeks. This week and next week, pre-Beach Reach, we're going to be continuing or really starting our Deconstruction series. And so tonight, we're really excited to have Shane Blackshear. Everybody, yeah, I don't know, it's fine. Y'all don't know who he is, so maybe later y'all will clap. It's fine. Gosh, guys. No, I'm just kidding. He's going to be coming and talking about deconstruction and the church and all of the things related to that. Maybe only some of the things, but some of the things related to that. And yeah, so we're really excited. Next week, we're going to be talking about deconstruction and the Bible. Can we trust the Bible? Why can we trust the Bible? Some of those questions surrounding that. So make sure and invite your friends if you have anybody who's been maybe asking that question or who is interested. Have them come and join us for that as well. And so before we get started, I'm going to pray, and then David and Miranda are going to start us off in some worship. God, thank you so much for tonight and bringing us all to this place. God, I'm thankful that you are here and present with us and always near. God, I thank you for your faithfulness. God, and I thank you for each person involved tonight. God, may our hearts and ears and minds be open to what you might say to us here tonight. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
You give life an eternal spark. I call you healer. You can mend any broken heart. I call you faithful Father, 'cause you finish everything you start. My soul was made to respond. I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back to you. Your love is boundless, beyond what I could dream. Your grace is patient, never giving up on me. And I call you bondage breaker, 'cause you're renting out the prison keys. My soul was made to be free. I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back to you. You are Rock of Ages, you're the great I am. You are King forever, the beginning and the end. You are Lord and servant, you're the Son of Man. You're the Lion of Judah, you're the risen Lamb. You're the second Adam, Jesus lifted high. I wanna see 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 Jesus lifted high. Be lifted high. Though I may suffer for a while, I have a hope that's undefined. I see the part but not the whole. I know this world is not my home. I wanna see Jesus lifted high. 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 We lift you high. I only have one hope to hold, where sin is crushed and hearts unfold. This King who died and took my place, he stood and walked out of the grave. Oh yes, he did. He stood and walked out of the grave. I wanna see Jesus lifted high. 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 You get the last word. You always do. You know the best way. You always move. You have the best heart. You always will be lifted high. You get the last word. You always do. You know the best way. God, you always move. You have the best heart. You always will be lifted high. I wanna see Jesus 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 lifted high. We wanna see Jesus lifted high. We wanna see Jesus lifted high. You get the last word. You always do. You know the best way. You always move. You have the best heart. You always will be lifted high.
You guys can go ahead and have a seat. I'm up here with Anna Kate. Everybody give it up for Anna Kate. Yeah. Anna Kate has a testimony to share with us of what God's been teaching her, specifically through our times of weekly going out to share and pray on campus.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Anna Kate. I am a third-year journalism student, and I'm graduating in May. So basically, every week we send different groups of students out every single day, and they go on campus to basically see what God's doing there, what God wants to do there, and go and have gospel conversations. And during this time, it's about 2 hours, so I go out from 10 to 12 on Mondays. And so for the first 2 weeks, we went and prayer walked to ask God, like, where do you want us? What do you want us to do? And so I was going, and I went over to the DMC and the CMA. And if you don't know where those are, that's okay. They're the buildings where all of the journalism and RTF students live. And it's on the corner, both of them are on the corner of Dean Keaton and Guadalupe. And so I'm walking past these, and we're praying over them, and I'm like, I can't wait to see what God is going to do there, because I'm not doing anything there, but God will do something there, even though every single one of my classes is, like, there. So throughout the weeks of doing this campus outreach, honestly, like, during that time, God has really been teaching me about what happens not during that time. So we set up Solarium, which Solarium is like these stock photos, and you put them out on a table, and people can point to them and say, oh, that's how I felt about my day, or oh, that's like what I think of when I think of God. And it leads to some really cool conversations, and it's meant to basically get to a gospel conversation. And so we've been setting up outside of Kin Solving, which is right by the DMC and the CMA. And during that time, I've just been looking at these places, and as I get to talk about God and be present, I just think about, like, what God is doing inside of those buildings. I'm outside, but I know that God's doing something inside of those buildings. And because of this time, I've gotten to see God do amazing things in places that I never thought I would get to see. So, like, during classes, like, God has blessed conversations about him. Like, I've gone into my classes, and God said, all right, here you go. Do what you do out there, but in here now. And I'm like, okay. And so, like, I was in a breakout room one day, and they were like, oh, practice interviewing one another. And then I was like, okay. And someone was like, so what do you want to do after college? And I was like, I want to go into ministry. And then they were like, why? And I got to share the gospel, but it wasn't me, because if it was me, I would not have wanted to share the gospel. I was like, I don't want anyone to know anything about me. I don't want anyone to know anything. But God said, hey, remember what I'm sending you out there to do? Do it here. Share as you go. And that's been an amazing blessing, and I wouldn't have known to do that or have seen the beauty of God doing that without campus outreach time for me to truly see our campus and see what God is doing there. So I really want to encourage y'all to go and do campus outreach and see what God wants you to see, because God's going to point something out to you, whether it's a class that you're already in, or if it's, hey, look at that building. Have you ever walked inside there? And I'm really excited for y'all to do that. And also, after doing that, I want you to go and share wherever you are. Wherever God has placed you, go and share there. So, yeah.
Thanks, Anna Kate. That's really encouraging, just to be able to see how God is moving on our campus and through y'all's lives. And yeah, so before we jump into our talk on deconstruction tonight, I wanted to take a moment. If you have just existed today, I'm sure you know of all of the tension right now between Ukraine and Russia and everything that's going on. And I'm sure we are all coming in with different places of what we think about that, how we're feeling about that, and all of those things. But we definitely want to spend some time just praying for the people in those places. And so I'm going to first read a psalm, And then we're gonna get in groups of 2 or 3 people and spend a few minutes praying. And then I'll close us in prayer after that. So this is from Psalm 13. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God, give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. I just imagine reading that and praying for those who are in Ukraine right now, those who are in Russia, all of the leaders making decisions. And so go ahead and take a moment to get in groups of 2 or 3 and pray together for the people whose lives are being affected right now, and pray for wisdom for all of the leadership involved in responding to this. Go ahead and get in groups and pray. God, we praise you. God, we know that even in these moments, God, where we don't fully understand what's going on, and God, where we just see the evidence very clearly and very strongly and very globally that we are living in a broken world. God, I am thankful that we can trust that you are good and faithful, and God, that you want to see all of these things restored to you. God, I pray for the people of Ukraine, the people of Russia, God, even just the people of Europe and especially Eastern Europe. God, I can't imagine what is going on in their own hearts and minds right now. And so, God, I just pray for peace. God, I pray that those who are making global decisions about how to respond to this and what to do, God, I pray that you would guide them. God, and for the believer in these countries who is wondering how long, God, how long will you turn your face away from them? How long will you forget them? God, I pray that they may feel and know your nearness, your love for them. God, that they may praise you and know that you are still good. And in all these things, God, we pray in Jesus' name, amen. Go ahead and you can get your seats back to where they were. And as I welcome up Shane Blackshear, give it up for Shane Blackshear. Yeah, that's better. Better than earlier, less awkward. So tonight we're going to start our series on deconstruction with a conversation about deconstruction and the church and all that's going on with that. And so I'm really excited to welcome Shane Blackshear. I got to know Shane Blackshear about a year ago now. I met him in his backyard. I started going to church, to a new church. They were meeting outside in backyards, and I just happened to walk into Shane Blackshear's backyard and talk to his 7-year-old daughter, who is, honestly, she holds better conversations than me and probably all of y'all with strangers, and it was great. I felt right at home. But enough about that. Shane is a realtor here in Austin. He's also on the leadership team at the church that I was talking about, Austin Mustard Seed. And he's an author. As we gave away 2 of his books tonight, we are actually going to sell a few of those books. So if you're interested in having one, they are going to sell for $10, but tonight you can get one for $5. You can Venmo the Longhorn BSM and pick up a book. I'll be standing by the table after Portico, and you can come get them. One more really cool thing about Shane is that he has some connections that go way back around here. And so I think we have a picture to throw up. Anybody recognize any people in this picture? Yeah, it's Marcy holding the Canada Dry. She's in Canada. They were in Canada. So Shane was actually a Go Nower, and he went on a Go Now trip with Marcy to Canada. Poor Shane. No, I'm just kidding. Shane's probably got a lot of stories to tell about that. And if you can't tell which one Shane is, Shane, you want to point yourself out in that? This is Shane, right here. Yeah, it's okay. We know what you look like today, Shane, so it's okay. Shane, we're really excited. I'll let you kind of take it away from here.
Some question time towards the end of my talk, if that's okay. If you don't have any questions at the end, that's fine. We'll just move on. I know you're going to go to your Portico groups after this and discuss anyway, but I thought it would be cool to open it up. So I want to do that afterwards, so just be thinking of that as I'm talking. If you've got any questions or anything that you would like to bring up or discuss, I would welcome that. First, does everybody know what we mean when we talk about deconstruction? Like, does everybody kind of know we're on the same page, or anybody? So there's some shaking of the heads. So, I feel like until 5, maybe 7 years ago, we didn't hear that term very much. I think when I was in college, we would talk a lot about doubt. And in a lot of ways, deconstruction is very similar to doubt that we have. And I feel like talk of deconstruction has come to kind of a fever pitch among Christians, among evangelicals. And it's not just people your age, people my age and older are going through deconstruction. I think it's just something that the culture has brought on, and it's not in itself a bad thing. In fact, I think it's really good that we re-examine, well, why do I believe this? Is this true? Did I believe this just because it was handed down to me? Or is there something real here? I think that could be really good and really healthy. But unfortunately, a lot of times, Churches don't want to help people walk through deconstruction. In fact, they might say that you're wrong for walking through deconstruction. They might blame you for walking through deconstruction and say, if you only love Jesus enough, you wouldn't go through deconstruction. And I just have to say that that's not been my experience. For the people that I know that have walked through it, and when I've walked through doubt myself, it wasn't for lack of love of God for going through it. And I think that God gave us brains for a reason. And if you are naturally skeptical, that's okay. God gave you that for a reason. And God's not against that. God didn't give you a brain that he doesn't want you to have. I don't know like where you are and how you feel about church right now. Some of you might be here and you're done with church. Like you've been hurt by church. You've heard so many stories. You've had friends that have been hurt by church, and you're done. Who needs it? And then there might be some of you who are here who you just, like church has been a really positive thing in your life, and you grew up in church and you felt like you were really nurtured there and people really loved you there. And that's great too, right? This isn't the oppression Olympics, right? It's okay if you had that story. And I would imagine that there are a lot of you who are just somewhere in between that, somewhere in that spectrum between those two places. I want to share with you this illustration that has been on my mind for the last several years. It's very imperfect, but maybe it will help you kind of understand some things and put some things in place. We've heard this idiom, being at the end of your rope, that people say, I'm at the end of my rope. Meaning just they've had it. They're ready to give up. And I have known people who, in their faith, they were at the end of their rope. At the very end, it all, and someone came up to them, metaphorically, and gave them another length of rope. And they were able to kind of fashion a foothold on that, and they were able to kind of get their foot in that and get to a place that was a little more sustainable, and it was life-saving for them. It was faith-saving for them. For me, more often than not, I have been in a place where I was in kind of a more sustainable place with my faith. I had enough rope that I had kind of fashioned together a little rope hammock, and I was kind of relaxing, sitting in it, pretty comfortable. And someone walked up to me with a length of rope, and they said, "You're going to need this later." And I said, "Okay." So I kept that rope. And then sure enough, later, some of the ropes that I had fashioned together started deteriorating. And I grabbed that length of rope, and I said, they were right. I'm glad I have this. I would be in a really scary spot if I didn't have this rope right now. So some of you tonight might be at the end of your rope, and I hope that tonight God might offer you a length of rope. And there's some of you who you just feel like this seems like good information, but I'm not really at the end of my rope. Here to you tonight, I hope, is a length of rope that you can tuck away, and someday when you need it, you can pull it out, and it will help you where you are. I think that I feel really fortunate that I was asked to speak about church as far as it concerns deconstruction, because in my opinion, most people who deconstruct Christianity and leave it behind, they don't do so because they can't believe in the supernatural part. Like, I've never encountered somebody who said, I was a Christian, but I'm not anymore because I just couldn't believe in the resurrection. I just couldn't believe in that all that supernatural stuff, all the miracles. I couldn't do it anymore. I'm sure that there are those people, and I've had doubts concerning those things that I've had to work through, but I've never met someone for whom that is their story. But I've met several people. I hear from people regularly online for whom they walked away from the faith because of the way that they saw the church act and behave. And for some of them, that was the way that they were treated in the church. Some of them, it was just for what they were seeing just go on in the public, what churches were doing. And for some of them, it was because of a loved one, how their loved one was treated during church, by a church. And so I think more often than not, when people leave the faith, it is because of the church. In the last several years, a lot has come to light about churches. Sexual abuse. A lot of sexual abuse coming to light. There's sexual abuse by pastors caught having a past of sexual assault of their congregants, sexual abuse, and also pastors covering up the sexual abuse that maybe they weren't a part of but happened in their church. And so instead of making it right, they were trying to save the organization, save face. And so they played victim, or they made the church play victim, and they actually treated the victim like they were the oppressor. We've seen this over and over and over again, especially in the last several years. Pastors cheating on their spouses, covering it up, having a completely double life behind closed doors. And so often, the churches, instead of rectifying the situation, instead of putting victims first, have tried to insulate themselves, protect the organization at all costs. We've seen in the last 2 years, churches utterly fail to navigate this pandemic well. Choosing to keep people happy, choosing to keep people giving money rather than loving our neighbors as themselves. Ignoring COVID protocols. And we can see now that there are geographic areas of the country that have a larger church presence and larger church attendance. They have a greater death toll per capita than other parts. We know there have been churches that have been complicit in deaths because they could not model for each other loving your neighbor as yourself. I mentioned the sexual abuse part. Of course, obviously, men and women both have been sexually abused, but women have often taken the brunt of that problem. And in general, the treatment of women by the church has not been good. Silencing their voices, excluding them from being decision makers in the church. The way that churches have treated people of color, excluding them from leadership, not caring that they're predominantly white, not listening to voices of people of color, not stepping up and saying what is right and what is wrong when people of color on the national stage have been used and abused. Church is being more involved with politics in the U.S. instead of the politics of Jesus, enthusiastically supporting politicians and policies that look nothing like Jesus and hurt people. Failing to love members of the LGBTQ plus community with the love of Christ. Neglecting those who can't give much money. College students, the poor, single people, all while spending lavishly on superfluous events and marketing. More often than not, if you go to a church's website, they're going to have a picture of a white family on the front. We have marginalized the church, the white church specifically, has marginalized people of color, has marginalized single people. In essence, it's marginalized people for whom they think can't contribute. The other thing about church is that even churches mistreat their own staff sometimes. A lot of this, we think about this coming from the top down, but I know people for whom they were pastors' kids, and their entire family got burned by the church. It doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it comes from the community as a whole. In fact, I think that some of the people with the most church hurt are those who have been on staff at churches. And people might say, no church is perfect. But more than not, I have discovered that people who say that are trying to cover up toxic church environments. They get caught doing something toxic, and they say, hey, no church is perfect. And what complicates that is that no church is perfect. My church, you know what? We try things sometimes. We try, something out of the box in our sermon style or something like that, and it fails. We weren't perfect. That's different than covering up abuse. That is different than letting people let their egos go wild. So after all of that, you may think that I'm not a fan of the church. But just wait. The thing is, the worst thing that I could say to you, and the worst thing that you could say to a friend who's going through deconstruction or has experienced church hurt, the worst thing that we could say is, it's not really that bad. Because for some, it's been that bad. Tell that to a woman who has been sexually abused by her pastor. It's not that bad. And so more often than not, when we are in those conversations with our friends, the best thing we can say is, that sounds really terrible. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. And not make excuses. Now, with all of this, my problem is that there's really no other way to follow Christ than being a part of a community of Christ followers. Like, this idea of solo Christianity is a real American, a really Western, a really individualistic thing. Like, I don't think it would make sense to people in the early church to talk about being a Christian that didn't belong to a community of believers. I don't think it would make sense, because by definition, being a Christian is being a part of the church. I'm going to read real quick out of Matthew 9. This is starting in verse 35. I think we may have that. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest." Now, I think today, in America, in our context, we are surrounded by people who are like sheep without a shepherd. But instead of like Jesus having compassion for them, we have animosity towards them. Because they're not like us, they don't behave like us. And I'm even talking about those who call themselves Christians but just can't bear to be a part of the church because of the abuse that they've experienced. Are we going to be like Jesus and have compassion for them? As it says, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Next, I want to turn to Matthew 16, 13 through 20. He says, "Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say the Son of Man is?' And they said, 'Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' He said to them, 'But who do you say I am?' And Simon Peter answered, 'You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God.' Jesus answered him, 'Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. But I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosened in heaven.' Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah." So there's a lot of different interpretations of this passage. I mean, it's a little confusing, right? I love my Catholic brothers and sisters and have learned so much from them, but I would interpret this differently. The Catholic faith, they interpret this as saying, Jesus is saying to Peter that he will build his church on the rock, saying the rock is Peter. And so that's why there's kind of Catholic understanding that Peter was the first pope. Like I said, I have learned so much from Catholic theology, but I would differ on the interpretation on this one. In fact, I think that Jesus means that he will build his church on the basis that Jesus is the Son of God. That makes more sense to me. On that basis, it will build his church. The Greek word there is ekklesia. When you see the word church in the New Testament, that Greek word is ekklesia or ecclesia, depending on where you went to seminary. That's defined as an assembly or, and I like this, the called out ones. The called out ones. When a church turns toxic is at the point where it turns to not be an assembly of the called out ones. When it turns out to be an assembly of the privileged, the assembly of the people who look alike, the assembly of people who want power. So what elements, like what does it mean or what does it look like to be a church? Like what's the bare minimum that you would need to call yourself a church? Well, I think according to Scripture, it would be a group of people who meet together to devote yourselves to the apostles' teaching, right, in the book of Acts. Devote yourselves to the apostles' teaching, i.e. the Bible, Jesus' teaching. Those who give together, like they give of their, in the Acts it says that they gave to anyone who had need, so those who give. Those who take the Eucharist together, the Lord's Supper. They gather for the family meal. And those who worship, usually in the early church, they would get together and they might sing a few psalms together. That's not a ton of things. And I get that modern churches generally, they have to have a little bit more infrastructure, right? Like I just got done helping clean up the sanctuary at my church. Like we need a place to meet, so we've got to clean, we've got to take care of the space. I realize there's some practical things that go along with that. But without that, if we didn't have a building, if we didn't have a space, we could still be a church. We could meet in a house, we could meet wherever we wanted. That would still be a church. What does not need to be in place to be a church? Dynamic preaching. These are some of the things that I hear why people choose a church they go to. They found the pastor on a podcast or something, and there's dynamic preaching, and that's great, and there's nothing wrong with dynamic preaching. But I find more often than not, especially churches who make a big deal of their dynamic preaching are compensating for a culture that is less than what it should be. Because that church is often built around the pastor and around his teaching, and that is just an abiblical concept. A great children's ministry. This may be weird to bring up to you, but this is something I see quite often, especially with people my age. They go to a church whose theology they don't quite agree with, whose culture isn't that great, but they have paid a children's minister a lot of money to entertain their kids, and they've got a dynamic children's ministry. Or hey, they've got a coffee bar. And look, my church has a coffee bar. I love it. I'm a coffee guy, but we don't need that. It's not necessary. That's not what I need in my church. So remember, when you're choosing a church, because I hope that you're a generation that kind of changes some things in churches. I've been a part of church staffs for a long time. I've seen some ugly, ugly things. Not some of the dark stuff that I mentioned, but just general pastors who have egos because they've not known any other way. Because when they came up under pastors who had egos. They could not take criticism. They couldn't share their leadership. The church is God's presence on earth when it is full of self-giving love. It puts its head down and loves its neighbor as itself, committed to cultivating empathy, grace, people above institution, truth, justice, service, and Christ-likeness in and into their unique culture. When you choose a church, you are choosing a culture. You're not choosing a pastor, you're choosing a culture. So is that going to be a loving, nurturing culture? I get excited now because I feel like there are some people rethinking things. There are churches that look like a lot of things these days. There's an organization called Fresh Expressions, which I'm acquainted with. Long story short, the Anglican Church in England, this was England's state church for a long time. It was a big deal. It was kind of the big show in town, the Anglican Church in England. They now no longer have state-sponsored churches. Their attendance has gone down. This historic church started looking, what can we do to stay alive? What's working? And they found this kind of enclave of people that were meeting in different places under different kind of common interests. So you might have some who are covered in tattoos, and so they get together on a Thursday night in a tattoo parlor, and they tell a story about Jesus, and maybe they sing a song, and they ask how they can pray for each other. And they do this regularly, and there's a word for that. It's called church. It's called church. There are dinner churches that will meet at people's houses, and they'll have dinner. They will share a story about Jesus. They will share prayer requests. They'll pray for each other. They'll give. Maybe they sing. There's a word for it. It's called church. It's called church. I am excited about the church's future that thinks outside of what we've normally called church and says, what do we need? What do we really, really need to call ourselves a church? And what else is extra? It's not necessarily bad, but what else is extra? And let's call it extra. Churches that have radical honesty and transparency. Jamie mentioned I'm a part of the pastoral team at my church. There's 2 of us on that team. So basically, most churches, they have one lead pastor. We split that up into 2 simply because we believe in team leadership in my church. Now, we also have a lead team. We're accountable to them. We answer to them. We're not allowed to do just whatever we want. We try to practice some radical transparency with them. They, at any point, if they want to, if I'm acting weird, they have permission to go and talk to my wife, and my wife can be completely transparent about what's going on at home with us. And the same thing for my co-pastor and her spouse. Radical transparency, because we see a pattern at these churches that are toxic, where the people at the top answer to no one. The leadership structure is very hierarchical. And we want to be different. We want to be flat. We want to be this mutual group who answers to each other. We are our brother's keeper. So, I don't know how this hits you tonight. Again, if you've not had any problem with church, if church has been a loving and nurturing place, this seems like probably real extra to you. But I hope that if you've experienced the ugly side, I hope that you don't give up on the church. And I get it. I get it. There's so much trauma that the church has inflicted on people. But I hope that you would see the redemption that the church could bring when the church is all the church should be and as beautiful as it could be. Okay, let's open it up to some questions. That sounds good. Does anybody have any questions? Just shout them out. Or not.
I have a question that's not as much related to church.
Yeah.
Why is your podcast called Seminary Dropout?
So I'll come down here if that's okay, but I'm going to put my mask back on so I'm closer. So I am actually a seminary dropout, but it's more of a metaphor for the show. So I get to talk to amazing scholars, people that have written books that people in seminary read, And so it's very scholarly, but I want to always be able to talk in a way that everyone gets, that people who have not gone to seminary, don't have higher education, that they can grasp it. So it's like, it's a little bit seminary, but it's a little bit dropout too. So yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Can you explain kind of what Go and Do maybe is about?
Oh, the book? Sure, yes. I would love to. I didn't come here to promote my book, but she asked, so what can I do? Yeah, I'll try to be succinct. I wrote this book with a man named John Perkins. John Perkins is a black pastor, civil rights leader. He has got biographies out there that you should definitely read. That I in all of them, but the main one is called Let Justice Roll Down. It's very, very readable. He essentially grew up in the South, poor, and moved to California. In the 50s, he became a Christian. He had this life-saving, life-changing experience with Jesus, and he felt convicted that he needed to go back to Mississippi to share the gospel. So in the 60s, he got involved in the civil rights movement. He really believed in a holistic gospel, that the gospel wasn't just pray a prayer so you can go to heaven when you die, but it's really changed things for us here on earth. And so got involved in this, which law enforcement in Mississippi in the 60s did not like. And it kind of culminated in this event in 1970 where he was set up by the Highway Patrol. They had falsely arrested some students who were marching with him, knowing that he would come to the jail. He went to the jail. They took him in and proceeded to torture him throughout the night. And as you can imagine, that's a pretty life-altering occurrence. And so out of that, he kind of came to a point where he thought he could get bitter and angry, or he could follow Jesus in that pain. And came to the conclusion that love was the answer, that the love of Jesus Christ was the answer, that the church was the answer. So years ago, I asked John Perkins for an interview, and his people said, yeah, he would like to do this. He's actually going to be in Austin. Would you like to do it face-to-face? And I was like, whoa, that would be so cool to meet this guy that's been just so big in my life, you know? And they asked if I would send the questions ahead of time, so I did that. The day comes for the interview, and we meet, and I was there a little bit early, so we're in his hotel in the lobby, and he's eating breakfast, and he said, you know, your questions, they kind of told a story, and I was wondering if you'd want to write a book with me. And I was like, yes. Yes, I would like that very much. And so what followed was probably for the next 2 years, we would call each other every other week and just talk, and I would just record it. And I didn't know what it was going to be. Like I said, he's got like 3 memoirs out there, so we didn't need another memoir. So after years and years of collecting this information, I finally sat down and I thought, okay, what's here? And so I looked at his life and also some things that I felt like God had been teaching me over that time. And I thought, what are the main points here that have been huge for me? And out of those, that came the 9 Axioms, which is part of the tagline there. And so that's kind of how I organized it. So it's a really small book. It's a quick read. I probably had 4 times that much material that it's kind of boiled down to the very best of it. And I'm really excited for it to be out in the world. It's brand new. It's the first time I've ever published a book. I'm really excited about it. But you really should check out just the life of John Perkins. Like I said, his first memoir was Let Justice Roll Down, which is just amazing. He's still around. I think he's in his early 90s now. He lives in Jackson, Mississippi, so we still talk, and since this book has just been published, we've been talking a lot. But you just kind of think that all the good people have already died, right? Like that's kind of how it feels sometimes, and like I get to talk with him, and I just can't believe that we still have a person like this in our midst, you know, who is passionate about Jesus and understands the radical call to justice that requires, you know? So, thanks for asking.
How can churches be radical about justice and
Yeah, that's a great question. How can churches stand up for what's right and what's just without becoming just a political institution? That's a fantastic question. So I don't have the perfect answer, but I'll say for me, every act of justice that I believe in comes from Jesus. And nowhere else. Like, I don't like this dichotomy that we see in culture where it's like, here are the justice people and here are the Christians, is really sad. It breaks my heart. And what's weird about that is, like, if I weren't a Christian, I don't think I would care so much about the justice part. Like, I think I'd just try to accumulate as much money as I could for my family. I don't know if this is making sense, but let me give you an example. So, like, the neighborhood that I live in is a lower socioeconomic neighborhood. We could either just move, or we could send our kid to a private school. We've decided not to do that because what happens when middle-class people do that is that they make that local school worse for the kids who don't have any other choice but to go to that school. And so that's how this happens. This is how we get inequities in society. And so because I believe in Jesus' call to justice, and because I am compelled to love my neighbor's child as I love my child, then I want my neighbor's kid to go to a good school as I want my kid to go to a good school. And so I don't know, if I wasn't a Christian, I don't think I'd care about that as much. I get what's for me. I'd try to take care of mine the best I could, and screw everybody else. That's their business, right? But this is what a Christ follower is, loving your neighbor as yourself. So for me, it's all got to be rooted, all the justice that I hope I pursue and take part of, I think that in churches, all the justice stuff, it's got to be rooted in the story of Jesus for me. It's got to be rooted in the story that God is doing something great in the world. And I think that really requires us to examine our theology. Like, if we grew up with theology that says it's all about, like, just praying this prayer, and then we get to go to heaven, and who cares about whatever else? You know? And all of our evangelistic efforts are to get other people to just say this prayer. It's kind of it's the pyramid scheme of Christianity is what I call it, right? If you're, like, telling somebody about Jesus, and you're like, okay, so this sounds good. I'll pray this prayer with you. And you go, cool, and you pray this prayer together. And they go, okay, cool, I'm a Christian now. What do I do? And you're like, you get other people to pray that prayer. And that's it? It's just this pyramid scheme where we're getting other people to sign up for this program, right? And there's never actually anything to do. And I think that we've got to really realize that that the kingdom of heaven is for now. That the rule and the reign of King Jesus is for now, that we are supposed to live in I get that it's not yet here, but it is here, right? It's already not yet dichotomy of Jesus. That we believe that the kingdom is here if we will live into it. And so that's, for me, it's all about Jesus. Like, if there's ever something that I can, if I go to the Capitol and protest, I'm protesting because of Jesus, whatever it might be. Or if I'm for something because of Jesus. So I think the people have got to be wrapped up, the church, to not just turn into a political entity, has got to be wrapped up and based in and rooted in the story of Jesus. Yeah, that's a really good question. I hope this isn't disappointing. I'm sure that that's happened. But once cement sets, it's really hard to get wet cement again. And I think part of what's frustrating is like I see so many good people in bad churches, and they think like I'm gonna turn it around, and I just haven't seen it. And what I wish would happen is that those churches would just go away because people would stop going to them and go to churches that are churches of love and grace and compassion, and that there would be no market for churches that are toxic like that, you know? So as far as like working from the inside, working for change from the inside, I just personally haven't seen it work out well. In fact, I feel like those people get burned to the point that they're just empty when they're done. You know, like they're still good people, but those are the people who get burned the worst because they're the ones trying to fight against the tide. You know what I mean? I hope that answer's not real discouraging to you. But the positive part is that there are really good churches out there doing good work. And most of the time, if I could give you any advice for finding those churches, they're the least flashy churches because they have decided to put their heads down and love their neighbors themselves. Yeah. Marketing is not real big on their radar. Yeah. Anyone else? I've got some books to recommend. I'm glad, I almost forgot about that. We've got some slides. Okay, so this book is called A Church Called Tove. This is written by Scott McKnight, who is a seminary professor, and his daughter. Scott and his daughter went to Chicago church suburb, Willow Creek Church, which had a tremendous scandal from its founding pastor break in the last few years. And so they kind of take a really honest, open look at what happened there. And then another church in the Chicago area as well. And so if you've experienced church hurt, like please read this book. This will be really helpful for you. Especially if you had church hurt, or if your deconstruction revolves around church hurt, yes, number one, check out that book. Yeah. Next, Radiant Church, Tara Beth Leach, who incidentally wrote one of the endorsements for my book. Radiant Church, Restoring the Credibility of Our Witness. Tara Beth is just so insightful, and just her words are so, so helpful. And so I recommend this book a lot as well, Radiant Church. Next one. This is for just kind of deconstruction in general, and especially if your deconstruction, it revolves around some of the more intellectual stuff, like how can I believe the stuff the Bible says? How can I believe in Jesus? And what do I do with this doubt? This book was that length of rope, that I talked about. Somebody said, you're going to need this later. That's what this book was for me. Like when I read it, I was kind of cool. And then later on, when some of the old